Hey everyone, in this quick video I want to show you the 4 new features that Photoshop has just released probably a few days ago, and I want to show you how I can include them into my architecture workflow and into my post-production workflow specifically. So before we start, if you also want to use these features within your projects, just go into your Creative Cloud app, go to the beta option and go to Photoshop beta and install it. Right now, these features are not available for the normal Photoshop, only for the Photoshop beta, probably in a couple of months or weeks, or I don't know, I have no specific idea. This is going to be available in the normal Photoshop, but for now, you guys can test it out in the Photoshop beta. Also, you want to make sure your contextual bar is turned on. So this is the contextual bar right here, which you can move anywhere on the screen. But just in case you have it hidden, maybe you accidentally hit this bar, just click anywhere outside of your canvas and click on show contextual bar. So the first feature that we're going to see is the harmonize feature. This feature basically blends in one foreign element into the image. So for example, I'm going to drag this woman, this cutout woman, into my interior render. Now, as you guys know, normally I would not have any people inside of such a small space for this render, but for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just gonna scale her down just a bit. Before I click on harmonize, which you guys can see is right here, I'm just gonna hide, first of all, this part of her legs, so they're behind the table. And I can also do this very quickly with Photoshop's improved feature of selecting subjects. So I'm just going to click on my background image, click on W, and then wait for Photoshop to highlight, first of all, this table. Then with Shift button, I'm going to just add this into the selection and also this element right here. Let me just add, with the lasso tool, this last element that it forgot to add, but that quickly I can have my table selected. Now, as soon as I have my table selected, I'm going to turn on my cutout once again, and standing on my cutout, I'm going to click on the mask tool and yes, press Ctrl I so I can invert it, and now I have my cutout behind the actual table. Now I'm going to select my cutout and click on harmonize. Now here we have to wait a few seconds while Photoshop tries to think and identify where the main light is coming from, what are the main colors of the image, and it's going to try to blend this cutout into the image. So as you guys can see, it took probably 10 to 20 seconds, and if I turn this woman on and off, you guys can see that first of all, Photoshop added some shadows, like some contact shadows around here, where you guys can see that it feels like she's actually sitting down on the table. Photoshop also added some darker shadows onto the plant and onto the general context here, just so the image feels like it has the person right here. But also within this feature, I also have 3 different versions of this tool. So this is the first one where you guys can see that the face of the woman is basically pretty much the same. It just has like this general highlight on the exterior part of her face. But if I go to the second option, the general color correction of her face is much warmer and is much better attuned with the general color correction that we have inside of our image. So this is a really, really good version of the image. If we just turn the whole image off and then turn it on again, it feels like she was already part of the render, and it looks just really, really interesting. Now, before we jump on to our next example, I also want to show you the improved remove feature from Photoshop. So I'm just going to stand on my image right here. Then I'm going to go to the remove tool or press J on my keyboard, but we're just going to select the remove tool right here. And this phone, I didn't really like it. It doesn't look like a really, really nice phone. So I'm just going to select it, just highlight it very quickly. Maybe also highlight the shadows just so we don't have any shadows appear. So I just release it, and that's it. As you guys can see, there are some mistakes. So I'm just going to go back and just highlight it once again. As you guys can see, it's taking some time to identify that I don't want this specific part right here, but in general, it did a good job. I can also do this with many other elements, but for now, I think this was a good example. Now let me show you another example of how we can use these tools. So I'm going to drag this plant inside of Photoshop now in this new render. And let's say I want to drag this plant right here, right next to this other plant. And of course, I want to flip her horizontally because the main sun is coming from this side. And as soon as I have her selected, I'm just going to click on harmonize. Now, as you can see, this is really incredible. So Photoshop added the shadows, added light, and just blended the whole plant inside of my image. So if I turn it off again, this was the original PNG, which has no shadows. The light looks kind of off. If I turn it on again, you guys can see that I have some nice shadows, and it seems like it was always rendered within this image. Here we can also test out the remove tool once again. So I'm just going to press J on my keyboard, select, for example, this plant right here, which I would think is a much more complex thing to remove. So I'm just going to select her right here, wait a few seconds, and here Photoshop removed the entire plant. So this is a really good use of the feature. So I'm going to erase this once again, probably make this a little bit bigger. Let's say that my plant is just kind of this big, right? And click on harmonize again. And as you guys can see, within a few seconds, this plant looks like it was rendered right within this whole Photoshop image. Now again, let's test out the remove tool. So I'm going to press J on my keyboard, and let's select this kind of vase right here very quickly and try to identify how long it takes for Photoshop to remove this image. And as you can see, it removed it pretty quickly. Here it left some mistakes, so I'm just going to highlight this all over again, but in a matter of seconds it improved it, and it's not really that noticeable that something was there. So now let's try this feature one more time. I'm gonna drag in this plant into this render right here. As you guys can see, totally different colors. It's going to be very hard to create. Normally I would have taken probably about 5 to 10 minutes to harmonize this plant within the actual image. But if I just click on it and give it some time for Photoshop to understand the colors, the shadows, and where the light is coming from, probably it's going to do a much better job than I did if I was doing this manually. So as you guys can see, it harmonized the plant. It did it very quickly. This is how it looked before the actual image. This is the plant that we have to harmonize, and this is the result within just a few seconds. This is crazy to understand. Now let's check out another feature within this new Photoshop beta, and this new feature is the adjust colors feature. So before, if I wanted to adjust the whole colors of this image, I would go to adjustment, go to probably single adjustments, and go to hue saturation and start adjusting the different colors that we have. But now I can do this much faster. So I just select the image, go to adjust colors, and select the colors that Photoshop is prompting me. So for example, this blue color, I can imagine the majority of it is in the sky. So if I lower the saturation, you guys can see it just makes the image probably look a little bit less bluish. Let's select now, for example, the warm tones, which would be these ones right here. And I'm going to just increase the saturation, decrease the lightness, but increase the saturation. So this is the correction before and after. And this was very quick, just using the colors that Photoshop identified that it has. So it's a very fast and quick way to adjust colors that normally I would have had to create different adjustment layers for each one, but here it's just going to be so much easier. Now for this image, we're going to do two things at a time. So for the first one, I'm going to import this car. I would say blending this car inside this image would be a very hard task to do. So let me just place it right here. Probably let's rotate it just a bit, just so it looks a bit interesting, but it's a very hard image to implement. Now let's click on harmonize and see what Photoshop can do. And this was the result. As you guys can see, this is pretty crazy. Of course, it's not as good as the original car that was rendered within DQ5 Render, but for an imported image that had very different lighting, this was the original lighting that it had, and this is the harmonized one. It looks really good. I would have loved for Photoshop to include probably some reflections of the car right here, which doesn't necessarily have it, but I think it's a pretty good image. Now let's try and see if we can import these people and what Photoshop can do if I just place them, for example, let's say right here, right? Let's say we're going to place them right here, just against the light. So I would expect Photoshop to maybe include some reflections, but also some shadows and make them darker. But let's just wait and see what Photoshop has in store for this specific cutout. So this was the first option, the second option, and the third option. I think I like the third option more. It's not that dark as the other ones, but it's still kind of dark. It's probably the same tone as this person right here. And as you guys can see, it gave me some nice contact shadows right here. And it erased this really ugly white line, this white stroke that it had around it. And it just imported it beautifully. So this was just in a matter of seconds that Photoshop did this. It's crazy to think that my whole Photoshop workflow can now change and be improved in less than in seconds with these features. Now let me show you the final feature that we have within this new version of Photoshop, and this is the upscale feature. So I'm going to merge all of these layers together. Now I'm going to select the image, go to image and go to generative upscale, and here I can upscale it 2x, 3x, or 4x. So as you can imagine, it's going to just improve the resolution of the whole image. So I'm just going to click on upscale, wait for the image to load and work. So here it upscaled the whole image. Now if we turn off this layer and turn it on, you guys can see the change in resolution. If we turn off the layer and turn it back on again, you guys can see where it upscaled and how it increased the textures and the whole general images. Of course, there are some things that probably need some more work. Let's say like this texture looks very noisy, but doesn't necessarily look like it has the concrete material that I initially planned it for. So if this is the improved image and this is the original one, so probably this feature would need a bit more work, but still it's an impressive feature that I think it's interesting to analyze and understand. Now, what do you guys think? Which of these features are you excited for the most? If you want to check out more AI videos, you can click on this playlist right here and let me know if you have any questions around these features, or if you would like me to test out more AI features within Photoshop or within the Adobe Creative Cloud system. I would love to test it out. That was it. It's a pretty quick video, but I wanted to show you guys how I would use these features within my architectural workflow. That was it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.